I'm Councilmember Mark Duchen, and I'm voting no on Prop Q because I love Austin.
Councilman Mark Duchen, thank you for being here. What neighborhood do you live in Austin?
I live in Northwest Hills, which
Okay.
is the north central part of District 10, which is
Okay.
West Austin.
Yeah. And how long have you lived in Austin?
I've been here for nearly 3 decades.
Okay. How's it changed in 3 decades?
It's obviously grown leaps and bounds. We were the fastest growing metro area for about 12 years in the entire country. So we've had a lot of growing pains in that span.
Yeah. So we're here to talk about Proposition Q, the tax rate election that's going to be on the ballot in November. And it's going to raise City of Austin property taxes by about 20%. And you're unique, not only that you're a councilman, but of all of the 11 on council, you're the only one that's come out publicly against it. Why is that?
Well, I voted against it on the budget process because I feared that what we were doing was increasing taxes in a time that we couldn't afford it, and then placing that burden on the backs of the people that were most vulnerable in this city.
Who are the most vulnerable?
I think the people that are at risk of being displaced. So if your TRE, if your tax rate election is going to support the most vulnerable people, right, in terms of homeless services, et cetera, this is going to be hurting the people that are one step away from that, right, that are going to see higher rents, that are at risk of being displaced or gentrified out of their homes, that you're saying, well, we need you to help fund basically $500 million worth of spending over the next 4 years.
So you say $500 million over the next 4 years. The tax rates, this is a permanent increase.
That's right.
So it's not, it's beyond 4 years.
That's right. But we have projections out for the next 4 years, and that's essentially what we voted on. And so what this tax rate election has, what Prop Q does, is it basically increases taxes in the form of increasing spending in both ongoing spending items and one-time spending items. And then that's charted out over 4 years. And so when you add that all up, you get to almost $500 million worth of spending in just that 4-year window through 2029.
For the proponents, it seems like the whole city apparatus is for Prop Q, elected officials and just the city itself, obviously. Everyone that works there, it seems like, that I've seen. And, obviously they stand to benefit because they get more money. There's also a lot of talk over the years about affordability and, having nurses and teachers and firefighters and first responders all be able to live where they work. Does this help them live where they work?
No, that's my fear and my frustration is that we're undermining affordability in Austin right now with this kind of initiative and this kind of spending. Right? We're not being sensitive to the fact that if we want teachers and nurses and essential workers and people that are struggling to pay their bills, people at what we call, 30 to 80% median family income in the city, if we want them to stay here and be part of this city, these are the people that will be hit hardest by this tax rate election.
And those people, they're being displaced. Where do they go?
It's interesting you say that because one of the data points that we've shared with people is how the region is growing. And so we live in what's called a metropolitan statistical area, MSA.
Mm-hmm.
And we are still one of the fastest growing MSAs in the entire country of regions our size, between 1.5 and 4 million people. But what's interesting is when you look at the data, you're seeing that the vast majority, the overwhelming majority, like 93% of people that are coming here are not coming to Austin and putting roots down here. They are going to Round Rock and Lakeway and Buda and Kyle and Manor and all other places and not Austin. And they're doing that for a lot of reasons. But I think one of the central reasons is just more affordable to live in those other municipalities than Austin. And so part of the challenge with this tax increase is you're basically saying, we're not sure we have the tax base to support it, but we're going to do it anyway, right? You've got people that aren't coming here to grow the tax base. Sales taxes are down 1.5% this year already and projected to be down the next several years. So where is the tax base that you can actually afford this? And in light of that, who's going to be hurt then is your people that are at risk of being displaced. And they're going to look around and make the same choice that those 93% of people are making as they come to the region and say, man, it's just cheaper to live somewhere else.
So the city of Austin, by doing this, is going to make things more expensive, just by the nature of a tax increase. And it's a property tax. It's not a choice. I can't choose to, with the sales tax, I can choose to maybe buy something cheaper or not buy that item. Property tax I have to pay. With the city of Austin doing this, talking about affordability, has the city of Austin done much to try to find efficiencies or anything like that? Like, what did they do to try to save money before coming to the city of Austin or to Austin voters?
That's part of my deep frustration about this is that we didn't really make an earnest effort to go find the kind of savings that you'd ordinarily expect an entity like the city to go do before asking people for more money, right? When you look at, first of all, we're the only big city in Texas doing this kind of tax rate increase, right? Everybody else found a way to work within their means and not ask people for more money. You look at a city like Houston, they actually undertook a very sophisticated process, a study that they did with professionals that has wound up saving the city over $120 million under a Democratic mayor and Democratic administration. And I think they recognized very wisely that it was more important to go be smart about how you spend what you've got and earn people's trust than reflexively go ask people for more money because that's easier. And that's the central thing that, if I say anything today, it's that we've got to go figure out how to build back and earn people's trust as a city and as elected officials. That's our job, and it's hard to govern without trust. And my fear is that this is only going to make things harder and make the city more divisive because we haven't done the basic work we needed to go do to find those savings.
Yeah. So with the, we're talking about doing just some sort of, any sort of auditing, trying to maybe tighten the belt just a little bit. And it sounds like the city of Austin is not willing to do that to the extent that this might make residents have to do. You increase my taxes, I have to pay them. I might have to tighten my belt. Why didn't you? Why doesn't the city of Austin do that?
Well, to the manager's credit, when we started this process, we knew we had a shortfall, and he asked departments to cut basically 1.5% of their budgets right off the top. And that did produce some savings, and some of those cuts were tough. But what's really smart about what the city of Houston did is they said, we're going to look across a lot of different metrics. We're going to run basically what they call a spending audit or spending study, a performance study, an organizational study, and a forensic audit.
Yeah.
And across those 4 investigative pieces, they were able to identify a lot of different places that they could save money without having to really let anybody go. And some of it was having different departments that used the same vendor, and so they didn't have the buying power they could have had to save money on contracts. Some of that was finding out that people were managing, in some cases, 3 or fewer people. And so you had a lot of organizational levels that were unnecessary.
Yeah.
And the industry standard, depending on the kind of role, is about managing 5 to 15 people. And so they looked at those kind of metrics and recognized that there were opportunities to save money in how they just administered the city. And we, for reasons, have chosen up until now not to do that.
So you as a councilman, would you say that From what you've seen, the city of Austin could certainly benefit from something like that.
Oh, I think the benefit would be overwhelming.
Interesting.
And I've been trying to advocate for that. And I've had meetings with, in some cases, my colleagues and the city manager. And we've met with the folks that implemented this in Houston. And it's a very sort of sophisticated technology in a sense. But it would not be hard for us to take that model that we know has worked in Houston and Milwaukee and other places and probably save tens of millions of dollars. Identify, again, to the manager's credit, we're working through some piece of that right now, right?
Yep.
We're looking at technology licenses. We're looking at IT spending. We're looking at some other things that they are actively working on. But it's different than looking at the city as an entire entity and holistically, and trying to find those efficiencies that might exist in places that we aren't currently engaged in. And so that's my hope, is that we can identify the gaps where we're not doing that work and go save those dollars. Because look, we've got a council that likes to spend money, right? Whether you're talking about big projects like Project Connect and Cap and Stitch and so on, or whether you're talking about this tax rate election. And my hope is that they can see the value of saving tens of millions of dollars through efficiencies, which would then potentially give them more opportunities to spend those dollars in a way that they might prefer to spend those dollars.
On the tax rate election, on Prop Q, the people that are for it, the organizations that are for it, often tout, that it will support homelessness services, that it will support EMS, that it'll support essential services. Are you confident that it will?
So there are three big winners, from what I can tell, in this tax rate election. The winners are the homeless strategy space. That's probably taking half of the dollars for this tax increase. It's EMS, and then it's the unions and city employees. And those are, I think, benefiting disproportionately from anybody else. I mean, there's $1 million worth of wildfire prevention in the tax rate election. And so when I think about the priorities that I've championed, including wildfire prevention, they don't really feature in who's benefiting here. And when we're talking about essential services, I think it's somewhat of a myth that this tax rate is keeping essential services when it's basically expanding, generally speaking, a lot of money that is going to new programming for homeless services, for EMS, and then guaranteed pay increases for city employees for the next 4 years, regardless of how the economy and the city are performing. So my challenge with it is, and my frustration around it is, there's a disconnect happening between people saying, oh, well, it's for parks and libraries and essential services, when in reality, it's really not going to those things. Those things are in the base budget. It's going to things that are essentially new programming. And when we talk about things like, oh, well, it's because we're losing federal dollars, those dollars were from COVID. They were American Rescue Plan dollars that were meant to be one-time dollars for one-time programming to get us through COVID. And we spent them on things like rapid rehousing for homelessness. And now we have a tax rate increase that spends more money on rapid rehousing. So it's going to programs that are ongoing programs that are very expensive, and I would say not part of what people usually call basic city services, like libraries, parks, fire, police, and so on.
I've seen many times from elected officials that this will fully fund homelessness. And I think a lot of Austin hears that and wonders, what does that mean? Fully fund homelessness. We've been funding homelessness fully for a long time, I think many people have thought. So what should Austinites trust that this is the thing that's going to fully fund homelessness? Or is it, this is going to do it for another year and then we're going to need more later?
I don't know what that means either. And that's part of my concern is we're always saying, if you go back and look at the ECHO reports, right? If we just do this year, we'll solve this problem. And that's never come to pass. In fact, our problem seems to be worse than ever in terms of the total amount of people experiencing homelessness in Austin from our latest point in time counts. I think, and some of the data that we pulled is reflective that we're already spending more than every other big Texas city in the homelessness space, right? We're spending more operationally. We're spending more through affordable housing dollars. When I say more, I mean vastly more, right? When you look at some cities like Fort Worth, comparably sized city, they spend hardly any dollars operationally on homelessness services. It's mainly covered in the philanthropic space. And they've had 0 affordable housing bonds they've issued for low-income housing. And it's hard for me to tell whether we're doing any better after spending all that money than they are, or whether we're simply making it more attractive for people to get help here because they know that they can get a roof over their heads or more support than a place like Fort Worth. You look at a city like Houston that's working on homeless spending. They just passed a plan, a significant plan, a $70 million plan. But that plan is split between the federal government, the state government, the county, the city. The city's portion of that is small by comparison. And so they're figuring out how to leverage other tools in that space. That's the other thing that I can't figure out is why we have this sense, this dogma that we have to go it alone in homelessness spending, to the extent that we're asking people that could be homeless next to go fund this program. That's the central challenge that these other cities aren't having to do. And we need to really take, I think, a close look at how the money is being spent and what benefit we're getting, because these other cities have managed to address it in a way that doesn't place a disproportionate burden on the city and the essentially people that are at risk of being homeless themselves.
Do you think renters are aware of what happens when property taxes go up? I know that's a large group of people. I know that some of them are, but just generally speaking, is the messaging there for renters about what happens when property taxes go up?
I don't think so. We've become a majority renter town in that period of hypergrowth that we experienced that I mentioned earlier over 10 or 12 years. And so it shifted, and now we've got more renters than ever. And certainly one of my concerns is that we don't have the communication and education out there, making sure that they appreciate that as their property taxes go up, landlords will find a way to make math pencil out for their businesses and their properties, and that's going to be passed on to renters in the form of higher rents. So I don't know if there's that sort of universal understanding out there that that's what's coming.
I know that you don't represent the east side, the Eastern Crescent, East Austin, but that's often used by city messaging by elected officials as, very vulnerable populations. And I think that's true. Do you have any fear for those populations as, a 20% increase on property taxes this year? How many can't afford that? And then what happens the next year? And then what happens is there's the next time a TRE in 4 years.
And you hit on a major concern of mine, which is that this becomes the new standard, right? One thing that I think is critical to remind people is that we have a major bond coming up next year, probably a $750 million bond that we're also going to come to residents and ask for more money for. And we just passed about $1,200 of additional spending, tax, fees, utilities, spending last year. That was a double-digit increase for residents. And so, yeah, my deep fear is that these folks all across Austin, really, not just the east side,
Sure.
are going to look at their budgets, look at their landscapes, look at the local economy, and say, I'm out. I can't afford this. I'm making, again, the same choice that all those other people coming to the region are. I'm going to go live elsewhere. I'm going to find a way to make it work in Manor or Kyle or wherever it is that's not Austin.
Yeah. Do you think that Austinites are aware of Prop Q, generally speaking?
I think they're probably not. And I think that's probably going to be a low turnout election. And I think it's imperative that we try and make sure people are aware of what their choices are so they can make a sound decision. It's the same thing I do in the dais. And that's what I'd hope that residents will do also.
So for those that don't know about it, maybe they're seeing and hearing about it for the first time from Councilmember Mark Duchen, what do you want them to know?
I want them to know that this is not the time that you ask people for more money. You first go find any efficiencies. And then you also look around and say, how are we doing as a city, as an economy, from national on down to hyperlocal? Are we prospering? Right? The Dallas Reserve shows us growing at about 1% next year. We're losing kids, and we're projected to lose more kids in our major school district, ISD. Our sales taxes are down and projected to be down the next several years. People are coming here, but they're not coming to Austin. So can we afford this is what I'd ask them. Can they afford this personally, and can we afford this as a community? That to me is the central question that we've got to ask. And in my determination, no, I don't think people can afford this right now. They're being saddled with tariffs. Hiring is down nationwide. We have some evidence that we may be soon in a recession. You know, this is not the time that you ask people to shoulder another basically $500 million of spending over the next couple of years. And I think when people look at their own finances and their own pocketbooks and their own situations, they're going to have to make some tough decisions. And my hope is that that's the conversation that happens out there, that people can be realistic and pragmatic and say, wait a second, maybe under a time of great prosperity and growth, we can afford this and do this. But under this circumstance, where we are at this moment and what the next couple of years may look like, no, this is not the right timing. And it's not something that I can afford or this community can afford.